It's summertime here in the state of Michigan. For many of the folks that live here, that means getting outside and enjoying nature. And whether you're after the peace and quiet of one of our many state and national forests, or if you just want to hang out on the beach and catch a sunset with some friends, there's plenty of recreation opportunities around, most of them involving water. For us, we had some great aspirations of doing a more long-distance kayaking trip that involved some camping on the banks. So we loaded the boats and all our gear up into the car and we headed north for the Manistee River. Here's a map taken from visitmanisteecounty.com that shows our entire proposed route all the way from Hodenpyle Dam to where the river ends in Lake Michigan in the city of Manistee. We ended up getting a really slow start on the day and arrived at the boat launch much later than we anticipated to a very cool and drizzly evening. And for these reasons, we decided to start our journey at the Red Bridge River access as opposed to the Hodenpyle Dam. This cut about 4 hours off of our journey, making our late start not so bad. The drizzles let up almost immediately after departure, and we ended up with a very fine paddle from Redbridge through the Tippy Dam pond. But we had to move at a quick pace to make up for lost time, because darkness descended upon us quick. We found our refuge at Government Island, at one of the only 2 campsites allowed on any island within the Tippy Dam pond area. We set up our tents by campfire light with just enough energy to chill out for a little while and cook a couple cans of soup and get just a bit of dinner in our systems before going to bed. When we woke up and saw Government Island for the first time in the light, we were treated to stunning views in every direction of the wide waters of the Tippy Dam pond. We ate a quick breakfast, broke down camp, and then geared ourselves up for another long day of paddling ahead. We took off late in the morning, ready and refreshed for this beautiful summer day. We were in for a hot and sunny afternoon, so we made sure our water bottles were full and we had plenty of protection from the sun because we had a couple hours of paddling to go across the pond before our first and only portage for this trip. We were in for a wonderful morning of paddling through this open, wide section of the Manistee River on some water that was absolutely like glass. I was loving life, soaking up the sun rays and enjoying my time on the water. Little did we know the portage wasn't going to be the hop, skip, and a jump that we expected, but was rather going to take us a half mile all the way around the dam, which was approaching quickly. We paddled off to the right where the boat launch is located, and we were so excited to get back on the river that we made the unwise decision to make as few trips as possible while carrying as much weight as we could. This ended up being a terrible idea because the portage absolutely whipped our butts and left us tired and sore and battered and bruised, but we pushed through and soon enough we were back on this beautiful river. The water through this section was remarkably clear, and it was really relaxing to just sit back and let the swift current push us along as we just kind of relaxed and recovered from the portage we just had to push through. Soon enough, it was time to stop and refuel, so we pulled over underneath High Bridge Road where we sat down and ate lunch with some beautiful butterflies. We finished our trail mix and goober sandwiches and said goodbye to our fluttering friends. We geared back up, knowing that we had quite a few miles to cover before we found a spot where we were comfortable camping for the night. This little section of river leaving High Bridge Road was about the most rapids we saw for the entire trip, so all you whitewater enthusiasts, take note. Clearly very thrilling for the both of us.
Yeah, splashed pretty good.
The next section of the river was surrounded by the Manistee National Forest on both sides of us, where humans were scarce and wildlife viewings were plentiful. There are a number of National Forest boating access points along this stretch of the river as well, including High Bridge where we were, Bear Creek, Rainbow Bend, and the M55 State Highway just before the big lake at the city of Manistee. However, none of these places offer overnight camping for canoers and kayakers, and from the looks of the banks of the river, our chances of dispersed camping were becoming less and less. We had paddled past a number of private campgrounds, maybe like 2, but both of them were filled with campers who were all drinking and partying and having a great time, which is fine, but we were looking for a little bit different experience, so we decided to keep going. And then literally as the sun was just about to set on us, we saw one final sandy pull-off, and we decided to pull over and check it out, and it ended up being the most perfect little campsite for us to stop. We had no idea if this was private land or if this actually was a public spot, so we just made sure to clean up very well after ourselves and leave no trace behind. After a very comfortable night's sleep, we were back on the river for day 3, ready to make our final push all the way to Lake Michigan. And we were once again in for a beautiful Michigan summer afternoon. From this point on, the river really starts to widen out and the flow starts to slow down as you begin to enter some wide flats of the floodplains and bayous of the Manistee River. And when you combine the wide waters and a very strong headwind coming off the big lake, it can make for a quite frustrating day of paddling. And as gorgeous as the weather was today, no matter what, even if we'd paddle a little ways forward, the wind just seemed to push us straight back. And if we sat and tried to flow with the current, I'd look over towards the bank and realize we weren't making any progress at all. The wind was just too strong. We really had no other option at this point but to keep on pushing forward. So that's all we had to do. We just paddled and paddled and paddled against the wind. We did continue to see interesting wildlife along the banks of the river, but at this point, I was getting frustrated enough to where I just turned my speaker on, put my head down, and wanted to paddle as hard as I could, just make it to the end. The river was still twisting and turning through the landscape at this point, so around every couple bends we did find some refuge away from the wind where we would try and rest and take advantage of paddles that actually moved us forward. The breathtaking scenery and abundance of wildlife sightings continued to motivate us and push us forward and excite us to get to the end. We tried to keep our spirits high and our ambitions strong. Here we pulled over, you can see the floodplain that surround us in every direction at this point on the river, there was just not much refuge from the wind anywhere we were. We attempted pushing on as best we could, pulling over often as we were pretty well exhausted at this point in the day and at this point in our trip. However, it did not take us to the end of the day to realize that making it all the way to Lake Michigan at this point on this particular day with the winds as strong as they were was going to be pretty much impossible. We knew we weren't going to make it through the open water sections of the end of our paddle here, so we had to say goodbye to our sandhill crane friends and paddle towards the next river access we could find, which happened to be behind the Meijer, just before you get to downtown Manistee, where we were able to call a cab who was kind enough to come pick us up with a trailer attached to the back of his van, and he had to give us a ride back to the car where we had parked at the beginning of our journey. Even though we didn't finish where we had originally set out to, we had still accomplished our goal of coming out here and having an absolutely amazing time and a great adventure.